Hello, intrepid viewers. Dr. Lena.Rodriguez, miraculously coming to you from tomorrow because I live in Australia. Okay, so, oh God, these glasses are crooked. Sorry, must drive you insane. Okay, before I forget, yesterday, I woke up out of a dream and had a clear download of Don Jr. getting arrested. But what was interesting about it wasn't being arrested for SDNY stuff or any of the big stuff we've been waiting on. This is something else. And I think it may be associated with recreational drug use, entertainment purposes only. So it's like he gets caught driving under the influence or called to the house where he lives with the inflatable Kimberly or something like that. So we may just see an arrest of Don Jr. prior to all the big stuff kicking off. So I'm just leaving that out there. Now, today I wanted to dip into, because there's been all these exposés about these well-known evangelical pastors and stuff. And I thought, is there any momentum to this? Are Christians in the heartland having to have a bit of a second thought about some of these guys who they treat as gods? And so I'm talking about here, there was Joel Osteen's church where they found $600,000 in the basement or in the wall or something when the plumber came in. Remember that? 600,000. We have the Georgia pastor and his wife who had 8 people in the basement, people with disabilities, absolutely appalling. And then, lest we forget, Jerry Falwell Jr., who famously got photographed with his pants around his ankles and sucking on a beer with the young woman. So these are big names in that community, and they're just flaunting this stuff. So I wanted to have a look at whether there'll be any inroads in that unquestioning sort of Bible Belt mentality. This has nothing to do with real Christians who are committed to the way of Jesus. That's not what I'm talking about. This is these guys, because anyone can set themselves up as a tin pot reverend, you know. So let's have a look what's happening with the evangelical movement. Is there any progress on that front of people being able to see with their own eyes how hypocritical these people are? Lecturing you every Sunday what you can and can't do, and then off they go for the rest of the week partying up large on your dime. Okay. Let's have a look. Oh, this is really crystal clear. It's just laying out the story. Now, here we go. It starts here with being kept up at night with worry. I don't think this is the congregation. I think it's more and more of these prosperity gospel guys. Give me your money. I've got a hotline to God. And if you're poor, it's because you're not good enough. You're not Christian enough. You've got to give more money to me. And this has been exposed. And I think a few others are worried. This is not just 3. A few others should be worried. So underneath it, this is the simplicity and the naivety of those who believe these guys. If you put a reverend in front of your name, you're a man of God. No, you're a mortal man with reverend in front of your name, and you have to earn the respect of your congregation by doing good works, not just putting yourself up there going, roll up, give me your hard-earned money, right? So this is the people who, this is kids, but it's the generational thing, particularly in those states, and you all know which states I'm talking about in particular, and it's not New York and Miami. It's about that. They have to actually grow up, for want of a better term. Behind them, they've been the boss man. They've been telling you what Christianity is. They've been telling you what the Bible says. They've been telling you how to do your life. This is the Hierophant at its most restrictive. While you're doing that and towing the line, they're doing this. Plenty of money and having a good life. While you suffer, do they put the congregation's money towards a new dialysis machine for the community or into literacy programs for poor kids? No, they spend it on themselves. Now, women celebrating here, this is celebrating something. So it's right next door to this card. So it's kind of puzzling in the sense, this is, I think, the guys who are worried there could be investigations into their behaviour and their business practices. But here, women are celebrating. They're certainly not celebrating over the new abortion laws. So they may be celebrating in a way that at last this has been exposed. I'm just going to pull a clarifier on that Three of Cups, because women bear the brunt of this hypocrisy. Right? Lest we forget the lyrics of Harper Valley PTA. You know, these are the ones who tell teenagers, no, you can't have sex education in schools. You just don't have sex till you're married. And then try and play them out the back after the sermon. We all know how it goes. It's the sheer hypocrisy of it that I find offensive. Okay, clarifier, please, Three of Cups. This card goes with this card. If they do not change their ways, this is what could happen to them. And this is also, I think, this is a betrayal. It's betraying people's trust and faith. I would go so far as to say it's betraying people's faith to keep pushing this stuff. And the offer they don't want to change this lifestyle, right? They're very happy with this lifestyle. So I think women, I think the next, oh yeah, okay, I just heard more exposés. There'll be stuff around sexual impropriety involving young women that is going to cause a scandal in some of these churches. I think that's what it's about, and they'll win their court cases. They'll win their court cases. No wonder they don't want that to come out. Righty-o. So, in other news, I also want to read, which I'll do now, on the Canadian truckers' protest, which is massive, and obviously many have travelled from the US. It's about mandatory vaccinations and they don't want them. And so this is part of Canada's lurch to the right. So sorry for you, Canada. Oh. So what's going to happen with those protests? It's very difficult to know what to do. What's going to happen with these protests? Apparently in Ottawa, people can't get in or out of their own homes and stuff. That it's massive. It's massive. Now, normally I like a protest, but obviously we're all biased. I like protests for good things and protests for other things. I just think what a waste of energy. Why don't you guys protest for better conditions so you don't have to take the little blue pills to stay awake on 1,000-mile trips? Why don't you get better conditions? Why don't you go for a 401k deal with your big companies? But no, let's go anti-vax. Right. Oh, sorry. Oh, I shuffled and shuffled, and here come the women again. These are weird cards for this, I must say. So they're not going away in a hurry with this Four of Wands. You know, this is digging their heels in, the Four of Wands, not going anywhere. So again, this could be the wives and girlfriends who support them. Could be as simple as that. All right. I'm reading this backwards because it's sort of telling the story backwards. This publicity about this is all over the world, and the world can see what it's about. With the world in mind with this is the Wheel of Fortune. This is the card of karma and destiny. It had to come to this point. And if it wasn't this sector, it'd be another sector. And so the powers that be everywhere need to decide how they are going to deal with this. I'd be interested, France is taking a very hard line. How are they dealing with similar issues? Excuse me. But transport is a running theme. And one of the nightmares, totally predictable, about Brexit is about the lorry drivers. And so transport is really in the news. As I said, from my perspective, only my perspective as a humble tarot reader from Australia, it's a foolish act, but it's not that simple. Of course, it's not that simple. Right, so this is a new era. I think we're going to see of strikes and protests, because at the end of the day, all people have really is the power of withdrawing their labour. And so we're going to see protests that, for me and possibly for you, are fabulous, and other ones that are just a nightmare. So it's a brand new day. They're taking the governments to the brink of the cliff. So what are the governments going to do is part two. I'll just do a quick read. What's Canada's government going to do? Well, this is the theft. You could say it's the theft of the myth that things are okay when they're not okay, to some extent. When you've got huge, these guys are powerful because supply chains, all that stuff, goods getting around, you know, by pulling the plug, this is what happens. I think the governments are thinking long and hard, evaluating what they can do, but they are actually held hostage. So I think to some extent there might be a capitulation down the road to their demands. We'll see. I'll revisit that if it's still going on in a few weeks. Now, I want to apologise for the link I put up on the Yeti's court cases last week. It was a dud link. It just didn't go anywhere. So I'm putting up a new link attached to this video, which steps through the court cases, or at least the top 20 court cases affecting the Yeti. And on June 29, we get to hear the Apprentice tapes. So will someone please make a note and remind me going into June? the Apprentice tapes are going to be released. Now, I hope the court allows us to hear them. They will be gold, will they not? It'll be Trump mumbling, stumbling, and grumbling on. They'll be hilarious. But we've got a new court case coming up, which is, remember Alexander Vindman, who spoke at one of Trump's impeachment trials? It's all a bit of a blur now, isn't it? Soviet-born, migrant family. All the men in the family have served in the military, including his twin brother, and they are suing, excuse me, Don Jr., Giuliani, and 2 other people for witness intimidation. And they were really cruel and aggressive to him and stopped him getting promoted and all of that stuff, you know. So that's going to be joy to look at. And that's just added to the list of the cases. Now, Miami and Texas, they keep coming up in my astral sort of things. Both those states are critically important. And now this huge Arctic iceberg has broken off and melting. It will have to have an impact, I would suggest, on the Florida coast and possibly the Gulf. But I also heard whiteout in Texas. So expect, I hope the grid holds, but it may not. So be prepared. Please be prepared. So a quick look at the Yeti now. How's he going? You know, he blurted through a really dreary, repetitive speech at his last rally. Republicans are starting to fracture. Those that support him unconditionally, those that support him reluctantly, and those who don't want him to run. So I think there's a 3-way split on the GOP. I'll read on that next time. But for now, I just wanted to dip in. How's he traveling? That might be an Australian expression. How's he traveling, meaning how's he doing, you know. Happening with the Yeti, inside Yeti world. He's got one friend left. Might be his alter ego. All right, he's feeling it, he's feeling it, he's feeling it. So he has one ally left. Now, we could spend the next 2 hours thinking who that is, because we know it's not Melania. Doubt it's his kids. He's on his, 16th version of Lawyers. He's a guy who never really had friends. He had acquaintances and business partners. I'm a bit mystified about who his friend is. I'll come back to that. If you have any ideas, let me know. But he has one friend. We know it's not Mike Pence. So the point is, he is feeling it because he's hemmed in. He can't go anywhere. He can't cut through. He's not having the impact he used to have. He's not being invited places. He has to generate these events, and then they're not massively attended. These court cases are hemming him in. Page of Pentacles. I think part of his stress, sorry, I missed, again, we had the Wheel of Fortune. This is his karma coming out to play. I think part of him is regressing. I think he might have genuine mental health sort of compromised stuff going on. But I think he's living more and more in another part of his brain. If he's got one, he's in another part of it. So it's all kind of weird. He is looking to this friend. See how these cards are? Well, they go like this when they're not on camera. This is someone who I think is a lawyer or advisor. who, oh, I think that's the answer to my own question. I think it's a behind the scenes person. We might not even know their name, but they're the last of the lackeys. They're the ones licking his sandals. You know, this is the last person he trusts. And I think he's clinging to that person quite closely. So when the inevitable happens and that person goes, he'll be truly alone. Whereas here he didn't get the 5 of Cups or the solitary cards. So he's leaning very heavily on one other person. I think it's a male. So that's that. Just a second. Now, lots of people have been asking about Bitcoin. And while I'm sorting out the cards, just on your comments last week, I noticed you did respond in large numbers to my suggestion that Tucker should spell his name with an F. Yes. But I think Tucker Cossack Carlson also has a certain ring to it. And isn't there a law, because there's 8,500 US troops who have been placed on standby in case Ukraine kicks off. So it's on the border of being an active military situation. And he's pumping the other side, going on Russian television every night of the week. Isn't that called aiding and abetting the enemy or giving comfort to the enemy or something? Isn't it something? Please let it be something. But in the meantime, Bitcoin. Oh, I digress yet again, viewers. That the GOP has been paying the Yetis law bills, which would be considerable. And once you see this list, you realise you're talking tens of millions of dollars. And yet he's still asking for handouts. He's soliciting money from his supporters. So if the GOP are paying his fees, their money is just going into his slush fund. You know, I wish they'd wake up. Okay. So where am I here? Bitcoin. Bitcoin. What is the future of Bitcoin? Bitcoin. Be careful with Bitcoin. Okay, so I would say fluctuations, and some people are going to make a great deal of money. Right, so remember this in the middle, the card of balance and moderation. So if anyone wants to invest in anything, or particularly the cryptocurrencies, be aware, only put in the amount you can afford to lose. Be very careful. There might be some legal issues coming up with Bitcoin. Okay, I would not be surprised. It's probably gone as far as it's going to go on some level, excuse me, and it's becoming some sort of burden to some people. Let's just talk about the basics for a minute. This is a currency which isn't actually a currency because it's not backed by anything. So the US dollar used to be backed by gold, but I think it then went to petrol, and then now that's not even the case. The point is, with Bitcoin and all the others, they don't exist outside of the notion they exist. So this is like any other pyramid scheme. Those who get in early will make a killing, and those who come behind will make less, and those who come behind them will lose everything. So be very careful. If you're moderate, you'll be okay. If you're not moderate, you could well be in trouble. So don't go overboard. Money certainly to be made, but at some point it will reinvent itself or collapse. It can't keep going on because it isn't based on anything. So be very careful. Don't be lured when you hear stories of people making absolute fortunes. It's not that they're not necessarily true, but it's a paradigm. It has its own fixed way of being. So it's been very successful, and Bitcoin itself, as opposed to all the other cryptocurrencies, might hold its ground, be allied to other stocks and shares and become a thing, like this, and be worth something. Whereas the others are going to be highly competitive and they could erode Bitcoin or whatever. So it's a roulette situation, right? Money to be made, but be ready to pull out really quickly, and certainly don't put money you can't afford to lose towards it. Please promise me, as an auntie, promise me you won't overdo it. So we'll see as it transpires. Now, next time I must read on Katie Porter. Thank you for asking about Tonga. It's very sad what's happening in Tonga, because the ships that brought in the aid brought in COVID. Tonga didn't have COVID before, now it has COVID. So after the ships have all left, it's going to have a third world health service, which is barely a health service at all, struggling to deal with COVID. So in some ways, at least I hope it's Omicron and not the really vicious version. But Tonga is still struggling, so thank you for asking. Okay, so I think that's it for today. Be alert in Miami and Texas. Please take precautions. Okay, and I'll be back with you next time. And I want to follow up. I've also had downloads about DeSantis, and I think what's going to bring him undone actually is either a climate change event, or remember that condominium that collapsed? Remember that? There's going to be more of those. I think those are the sort of things that are really going to impact in Florida and Texas. So you have all my love. Comments, please. Love your comments. And your Saturday night, US, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I'm on with Johnny and Becca and Jen Lynn. I'm not sure what channel. I think Johnny's. So check that out. Tarot's Apprentice. Your Saturday night. I'll see you then. Ta-ta.